Welcome to Deep Transformation, Self-Society Spirit. I'm Roger Walsh, and our co-host is John Dupuy. And today we begin something new for the podcast. We begin a series of episodes offering an overview and in-depth exploration of a single topic. That topic is the diamond approach, a system created by Hameed Ali. And the diamond approach is many things. It's a new spiritual path and school. It's a veritable library of some 30 books. It offers a profound understanding of life and reality. And it provides a synthesis of psychology and spirituality, all aimed at helping us awaken to our true nature, to the nature of reality, and to become conscious expressions and servants of that reality. It came through a remarkable man, Hameed Ali, whose pen name is A.H. Almaas, and who's with us today and will be episodically over the next several months or year. Before introducing Hameed more fully, I'd like to point to the remarkable importance and uniqueness of the diamond approach by situating it in a historical and cross-cultural context. The diamond approach was born out of and through Hameed's direct experience, but it's informed by the world's religious, spiritual traditions and philosophies, and by contemporary psychology. This is the first time in history we've had all the world's religious and spiritual traditions available. And it's just been extremely rare throughout history to have access to more than one tradition, let alone to be able to practice it safely without ending up on a funeral pyre. We've gone from enforced spiritual isolation, being exposed to just one tradition, to having a plethora of traditions, almost a spiritual overwhelm. But we also have, in addition, we have new understandings of and ways of working with the mind, the Western psychology and psychotherapeutic practices. What Hameed Ali offers us is a path born out of his own experience, but informed by all these different philosophies, religions, spiritual traditions, and Western psychology. So we have a unique synthesis here and a unique path. It's very rare to create a complete path, especially one that endures, but Hameed has certainly created a complete path and created an institution and school, the Ridhwan School, which certainly looks like will enable this to endure. Hameed has written some 30 books. I really lost count of them, which offer a vast and profound understanding of life, awakening, and reality. And this is just an enormous gift to humankind. I personally feel that Hameed is one of the great spiritual teachers and pioneers of our time and of all time. So Hameed, I want to welcome you. I know John has some things he wants to say by way of welcome, but we're just so delighted to be with you and that you've agreed to do a real in-depth exploration and overview of your life's work. This is a wonderful gift for everyone who will listen. So thanks so much for being with us.
I'm glad to be here with you, John. Roger,
Yeah.
John, both of you. Yeah.
And as Roger was saying, I just want to re-emphasize, but this is our third time that we've met together. And the first time we were discussing it, and Roger said that Hameed is one of the great sages, or the greatest sages of our time, if not all time. And I have deep respect for Roger's learning and his perception, and I've known people in the Diamond Approach for years. So I take that to heart, and I think it's true because of my experience. And this is the book, The Inner Journey Home, Soul's Realization of Unity of Reality, that I've been working on now for 3 months. And if you could see this, it's all underlined, marked, and it's my practice in the morning. I start with that book and I still have 90 pages to go. And I simply cannot read more than 5 to 10 pages in a sitting. It is that impressive, and it has extremely impacted me. And it's very psychoactive. It's very spiritually transformative, as well as intellectually, psychologically. So I would recommend, if you feel called to it, to get this book and follow along and listen to these podcasts in sequence, and listen to it maybe all, and take notes, go back, stop, listen to it, because this stuff is so profound that it takes a bit to digest. And after I would do my day reading, and once I just hit that point where I knew I couldn't go on anymore, I would do my meditation. And interestingly enough, I found that my meditation was very, very still, very open. And I didn't get, monkey mind. I wasn't thinking about everything I just learned. I get very still. So it was actually a help in my internal practice that I do every day. It's also been somewhat of an answer to prayer, because for the last year or so, I've really been struggling and going through depression or dark night of the soul. My symptoms and experience meet both. The literature qualifies for both. And this has been a tremendous gift when I felt very, very lost and very sad. And it's been amazing and a real blessing. So I'm continuing to work on it. And I want to say, Hameed, obviously from your accent, that English wasn't your first language, yet the language in this writing is so exquisite, so precise, so well done, almost miraculously, sacredly done in describing some of the most ultimate issues of existence and experience and enlightenment in ways that I've never heard so clearly expressed. It's truly a transmission and a gift. And yeah, so read the book. I still am. And Hameed, it's been extraordinary. And I kind of wanted to start with kind of the first issues that you addressed in the book, because there's a logical sequence to how you wrote the book. And the first part, you were just talking about the need for the diamond approach, or need for this knowledge, because of the dissociated nature of the modern human ego, and what that's brought about. And at the same time, the modern ego being some kind of evolutionary plan of God to get to the point so that we can get beyond the reified, religious, dogmatic look at the world, and science had to become clear, and we became individuated, but we lost that connection with the cosmos and with being and God. And this is a brilliant integration of science, of the enlightenment that from all the esoteric and wisdom traditions, and psychology, modern psychology, and it's such a blend, and it's brought together. And in addition, and perhaps most importantly, one senses that this is a first-person account of all these states and all the wisdom that you're describing. It's not just, you're not getting this from the books. This is coming, you've experienced it, and you're able to, through whatever gift it is, divine grace, however you want to say, that comes through, and it deeply impacts and affects the reader if we're open to it. So thank you deeply for that, Hameed.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, hearing you talk about the great sage, I said, really, where I don't find anybody here to be a great sage.
That's the first qualification.
There's nothing here at all.
You carry your ego very lightly. That's why I knew I could say that without it really making a great impact. Your very gossamer, translucent ego structure is quite apparent the more that one gets to know you, talks to you.
Yes.
So, should I start with a question?
Sure, we could begin.
Yeah,
Well,
why? Oh, go ahead, Roger. I'm sorry.
Yeah, John, Hameed, I think it might be helpful for people if you were just to briefly summarize. Both John and I have said what we think the diamond approach is, but might be nice if you said what it is.
Well, I mean, the diamond approach, and I call it diamond approach because that's the name we gave it at the beginning. I don't know if the best name for it, and I don't know how that can be named because it's always changing and expanding. And it is like an experience and understanding of reality that is kaleidoscopic and multifaceted. And that is part of its uniqueness, because many teachings, they focus on one particular condition of realization and really delve deeply into it, and that is the liberation. Like we take Ramana Maharshi, for instance, he focused on the stillness and the silence, which I call the absolute, and he was there, he was that. So he was a great exemplar of that. And that is one approach in spirituality. That approach is different. It does include the absolute and realization of the absolute. I know it very well, although I learned from Ramana Maharshi a lot, by studying him and seeing that, yes, I know from experience what he's talking about. But the diamond approach, I mean, I thought when I was experiencing the absolute, that's it, I got it. I got what Ramana Maharshi says, I am that. They say. But then things changed without me expecting it or doing anything about it. And before I know it, the other realization showed up that very different from the realization of the absolute. That began a whole other way of realizing the kaleidoscopic nature of this teaching, that as an individual, I'm not in control. I'm not the one who does it. Although at a deep level, I am all of it. But as an individual that grew up as a human being, body and mind and history and culture and all that, as my family, friend, whatever, I am that, but I'm also, I realize as the teaching comes through, it's an experience, and the experience of realization. So I become the teaching. So I and the teaching are one. And the teaching kaleidoscope is like one way of looking at it, like when I contemplate my experience, I could experience the body the way most people experience their body. But at the same time, I can experience an inner body, faceted, multifaceted, colorful, beautiful gems. But I also, at the same time, experience a vastness, spaciousness. They're all there together, and a slight shift of consciousness can make one be more than the other. The inner body is the lens that, as it turns, it sees reality in a different way than others, and reveals different teachings, different realization, different knowledge, different teaching, different conceptualizations. That at some point, I learned that somewhere realization I had to go to different traditions. Who talks about this? And I found some traditions talk about this, like Kashmiri Shaivism talks about this, Dogen Zen talks about this, and I learn from them because they go into those things more deeply, more completely than I did. They spent a lifetime on it. And then at some point, like, doesn't matter what's happening. It's not, it's unpredictable. And this lens moves in mysterious ways that nobody has control over. It is the teaching that does it. And the teaching is a manifestation from our fundamental spiritual nature. manifesting. For some reason, spiritual fundamental nature wanted to reveal a teaching. It wasn't me. And for some reason, it appeared through this person who grew up in the Middle East and came to the United States. So yeah, this person has the combination of two culture, an old, simple culture, before the country became advanced and richer, to an American culture, which is modern, Western, sophisticated. The combination of the two made it possible, I think, for this consciousness to allow this lens to turn whichever way it turns. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to draw out something you said just in passing, Hameed, which is one of the distinctive features of the diamond approach, and that is most traditions posit one particular state or realization as the goal. And one of the striking features of what has come through you is an appreciation that there are multiple realizations available to humans, and that one realization or awakening can be, or enlightenment can be, not the stopping point, but a stepping stone or a portal to other realizations, as you call it, runaway realization, and end up potentially boundless number and possibilities of awakening.
And it affirms the validity of all these enlightenment spirit experience from the different traditions. It doesn't say just this or that. I'm enlightened, and obviously you're not. It's like it gives validity and meaning, and you've put it together in a way that's integrated.
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing with the diamond approach is that it recognizes the validity and the truth of these other traditions, because I sometimes studied them, had teachers there, experienced them, I know them, I know them to be true, and I know they're liberating. But then my experience moves, like one time I went to an empowerment by the head of the Nagma at that time, Great Lama, and he did the transmission for 2 days about the Dzogchen, a different level of Nagma, all the way to the highest Maha'ati Dzogchen transformation, where he transformed the whole room. The whole room became a bejeweled palace. And so I was already know some of that, but that filled it out more. But then when I went home, I realized that's all true, but there was something in me that did not change, something in me that stayed solid, its own truth. And I explored it. It turned out it was a whole other universe, different from the Dzogchen universe.
Yes, and Hameed, you mentioned a couple of times in the book, at least, you use the word guidance. And I wanted to ask you about that. Do you have a sense that at some point did you realize that what was coming through you was supposed to come through you, and you were being guided in the unfoldment of this teaching or these revelations, I guess you could say accurately?
Yeah, guidance, you see, in this teaching is a manifestation of our spiritual, a particular manifestation of spiritual nature, whose function is to guide the consciousness to where it is going to unfold, where it's going to reveal, to let it, oh, look at this, and turn here, don't get stuck on this. So it's a pointer, just like they say the teacher points, doesn't it points to the reality? That's what the guide does, points. Look there, So the guidance is not telling you, well, in 2 years, such and such going to happen. You should get this job or marry this person. Not that kind of guidance. It's a guidance of revelation, of what is it? It's how to be open to the next revelation.
And as you've as you've as this has come through you, Hameed, and as you have, as you said, looked into and explored very deeply the paths of other traditions and their realizations, you've somehow been able to draw on these and inform the revelation that's coming through you with in so many other ways. And I wonder if you could speak to what some of the universals and some of the unique features of the diamond approach.
Well, one thing universal that's common with all other teaching is that there is a true spiritual nature to all being, to all reality, to all life. It's not just what appears to the eyes that most people. There is something profound and deep and timeless. That is true. But that profound, deep, and timeless ultimately does not have a particular form of manifestation. It has many. And each teaching basically focuses on one manifestation of it. Like that. And also, each teaching, not just a manifestation of a particular manifestation, but the whole teaching around that manifestation. Sometimes some teaching in one state, some teaching have many grades, many levels, and enjoyed throughout my life studying the different teaching. Like I remember studying Kashmiri Shaifism. And all the way they do it, and so they have some precision to all that, what they call the tattvas, and then many manifestations, all the way from Shiva and Shakti, and then all they go and basically the idea is how Shiva limits itself more and more and more and more until it becomes the ego self, and through about 30, 40 tattvas, and it is a beautiful way of looking at things. But that is just one way.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean reality is real like that. But let's say reality can appear that way. And can appear that way, it's genuine. There's a whole tradition built in us, great teachers and realized being manifested through that tradition. So I enjoy those. And some of the stuff is similar to what's in this teaching here. Some of it is informed by that teaching. And the way so I look at it, I study a teaching, I learn the realization, and then take it in, and then my consciousness brings it back again in a slightly different way.
Mm.
That gives it the flavor of this teaching.
Mm. And what would you say? What would you say is it that is added? What, as a tradition and its realization pass through your consciousness, you said it comes out was slightly different. Well, what is added?
Yeah, it's not a matter of added, it's like a different change, a shift in direction. Like learn about Dzogchen teaching, Rigpa, or the Dharmakaya, where the pure, transparent, empty awareness that is the nature of everything, right? That I learned that. I learned from different lamas, and it's beautiful and liberating, and it could be considered realization or enlightenment. But then that I experienced that, but I realized there are many subtleties to that. Many can be seen, it has different dimensions to it, which the teaching itself is object some of the master must have it, they just don't have it in their literature, you see. And then another thing that became added is how that becomes a human being in ordinary day. That is something that the diamond approach is very important for the diamond approach, that regardless how transcendent and vast, non-dual or whatever is the ultimate nature, the important thing, how it lives as an individual human being living an ordinary human life and enjoying this life the way it can be enjoyed to the fullest of its possibilities. So that's one thing, I think not emphasized in most Eastern tradition, is that this life, this ordinary life, has its own value, its own unique opportunity. It is not here so that we just get enlightened and go somewhere else. It does that, as the Buddha said, the human life is important to get enlightenment. It's true. However, this life itself, we learn from it something that's not possible to learn other places. We learn about life, what is human relationship, what is love, what is enjoyment, what is, creativity, all kind of thing that the physical body and the brain we have gives us the opportunity to learn. So when some teaching, like some of that, they say, the human being, the individual is an illusion. That's what we talk about. Why will reality create an illusion to reveal itself? It is part of its truth. The human being is a true thing. The human soul is a true thing. It is an expression of the fundamental reality manifesting as an individual consciousness that has possibilities. And one of its possibilities is to reveal the non-dual ultimate truth.
Yeah. So one of the distinctive features of your realization and of the diamond work is an appreciation of the individual, and you contrasted it to, for example, some of the Eastern traditions with their emphasis on, well, getting out of here, getting out of the body, getting out of the world, awakening to what is beyond the world, but then not this subsequent step of return. Your path has the path of ascent and the path of return. And your emphasis is not unique, but it's certainly extremely rich in its emphasis on how one can live fully as a human being, but informed by or expressing the awakening that the path allows. It's a beautiful integration.
And I want to add that some years ago I had an experience, a revelation where it was totally non-dual. A little me was floating in the middle and connected, was everything. But at the same time, the teaching was, however, you do matter. Your little dinky John self, as well as everybody else's little self, is extremely sacred and important, and it matters. And it seems as if there is in the unfoldment of truth and the revelation of the universe, that the human being, we become egos, what we've lost our souls, our conscious connection with them, are very important and have a great task to do. And part of that or an essential part of that from your writings and from this book is that the rediscovery of the human soul that connects us to everything at time, but on of each person and their potentialities.
Yeah. Because when you look at it, spiritual experience, realization, boundlessness, infinity, they all happen to a human being. They can't happen without a being. The individual being is instrumental, necessary. I mean, I remember, one of the great masters who brought that point is Sufi Ibn Arabi, called the Sheikh Al-Akbar, the greatest Sheikh. He said, God needs the soul just as much as the soul needs God.
Mm-hmm.
He said the soul needs God to exist. And God needs the soul to reveal what it is.
Can Hameed, can you tell us a little more about what you mean when you say the soul?
Yeah, so that is a big thing. And an important part of the Dain approach teaching, and it is important in many other teaching, like the Kabbalah has a concept of soul, Sufis have a concept of soul, some of the Indian yogas have a concept of soul. Now, an approach has a concept of soul, but it reminds me of a Sufi book, Awarif al-Ma'arif, and 600-year-old book, where there has a chapter each, a chapter on soul, chapter on spirit, chapter. When chapter soul, it says the knowledge of the soul is infinite. You can never know it all. And that's what I see, that each teaching has a segment of the knowledge of the soul. Like the Kabbalah has something about the soul, but it's different from what the Sufis have about the soul. There's overlap, but not exactly the same. They both know different things. They could actually learn from each other a lot. Sometimes they talk, as they did in Andalusia, but most of the time they don't. The yogis have a different understanding of soul. And Diamond Approach has an understanding of soul too. That is unique to it, related to some other, but unique to it. A soul basically means that consciousness is not just an ocean of consciousness. And, as many teachings say, that consciousness is the inner nature and the nature of reality, and it is the nature of everything, and it is infinite, boundless, timeless, all that. All that's true, and that when you recognize consciousness that way, it is indestructible and immutable and all of that. However, that consciousness individualizes itself into an individual soul, many individual souls, of course, but as you individual yourself as you, as John, as an individual consciousness that expresses this vastness and fundamental consciousness as an individual consciousness that is dynamic, that is alive, that can learn, that can vivify the body, bring the body, make the body alive. It is the life of the body, and it is the mind of the body, it is the heart of the body, and it is the experience of the body. So our subjectivity is basically the experience of the soul. But we don't know it as a soul until we learn that there is in us an inner consciousness that is its own thing, not just a sensation or the thoughts of the body. But the sensation and the thought of the body comes from somewhere else deeper. That's when we recognize the inner soul.
And somehow in our modern Western unfoldment or civilization and our knowledge of science and psychology, we've become very dissociated from that. And I gather from reading your book, Hameed, that one of the great, powerful, perhaps reunifying, healing messages or ideas or noetic forms that you bring forward is the idea of reconnecting with the soul, experiencing the soul, and cultivating what that means to it.
Yeah. So you need to recognize I didn't come into this teaching believing in soul. I didn't know there was a soul or not. And it is a discovery. It is a discovery. I was, like many other people, working on myself, understanding myself, meditating, doing all kinds of things. And at some point, it was later in the teaching, actually, that I discovered the soul. First, I discovered the true nature, the fundamental consciousness, and the presence, and the luminosity, all of that, all the way to the absolute nature. And when I was in the absolute, at some point, I had this vast stillness and silence. It was in my bedroom. And suddenly I see this thing flitting around, like something particular, moving around, running around. And I recognize, oh, it's a consciousness. it is an individual consciousness, like almost an entity, but it's not exactly an entity in the sense of separate entity. But it was like something appearing within the absolute, in the vastness of the absolute, and it is individual, and it was still scared of the absolute. It's scared it's going to eat it up. And it does at some point. That's a whole other process. But that's when I recognized the soul. I said, oh, that's my usual me. The usual me that is not just my history and my thoughts, whatever, is the consciousness that has the history. And so it's not the body that has the history and the experience, it's the consciousness that does. It is this consciousness. That's when I recognized the consciousness. And that became the revelation of the soul more, what it is, and what it does, what is its function, what are its possibilities, and what is its importance. It was good to recognize that, for me, the soul was a discovery. I didn't believe in a soul or not, so I didn't think about it. I was just working in myself as a, body mind, which everybody does. They always begin as a body mind. You wonder, why is that? Even the greatest masters start with a body mind as an ego, but they develop and learn something else. So anyway, so the soul manifested and revealed the whole dimension of reality, a whole way. Important thing about reality, that all experiences happen through this prism that we call the soul. All experiences, the ordinary experiences, transcendent experiences, all of those appear within it. And the soul can appear explicitly or implicitly. Like when somebody is being the vastness of being the unity of the universe. They are the unity of the universe, however, their perception is of their room. So there is a localization. Where does the localization come from? People think, oh, because of my physical body. It's actually not. Because sometimes somebody's outside the body. They'll still be localized. So the localization implies the individual soul. And that is, it's where I at some point use Western philosophy, like the, phenomenology, about the phenomenology experience, to show more about that experiencer that we call the soul. It's a book that's being edited now for years, hasn't come out. The integration design approach with philosophy.
Okay, well, let us know. We all want to talk about
Yeah,
it.
I'm waiting for the editor to take a long time, because I need an editor who has immersed Western philosophy.
Uh-huh. Several times you've talked about, as you do in your writing, about the way in which these recognitions and realizations and understandings come to you and through you. And clearly, in some way, this vehicle has been unusually, uniquely receptive. And I wonder if you have a sense of what it's been about you and as the individual and the practice you've done, which has allowed you to be such an effective medium for these realizations and teachings.
Of course, I don't know the whole answer. It's a mystery. I know some of it, which is that I had the good fortune having loving parents and family, and I was living in a simple culture. Life was simple. People trusted each other. There was a neighborhood of people who knew each other, who visited each other. My parents loved me dearly. And so, although there were, the usual issues, siblings born, oh, what happened to my mother, Titi, all gone to somebody else's mouth. All of that happened. I had to work through it anyway. But they were loving, and I had my mother, grandmother then was just as loving. She loved me dearly. My father loved me so much that when I got sick with polio, I had polio about 20 months old. They did blood transfusion from him to me, and he was sometimes almost unconscious, giving me, so that indicated to me how much, love there was. There were difficulties, but the love was so dominant. I think that's very important for any human being, because the love allows the soul to have some kind of trust reality. Trust, confidence, innocence, and that innocence is the openness to what's possible, you see. And that's very important. But also, the other thing is that the guidance we talked about. The guidance was like, I didn't know that this conscious was guided. It took me a while, but I was guided. Like the fact that I came to this country is part of the guidance. The part I studied, what I studied, was part of I studied physics and math. Why? Because I'm not teaching it. I thought I was going to be a professor of physics. That's why, in Kuwait, they gave me a scholarship to become, get a PhD, come back and study, teach in the university. I didn't finish it, because if I finished it, I would have had to go back and then change to psychology, you see, instead. But I studied physics and math. That's part of the guidance, that guiding this individual to have a sharp, clear, precise mind who is oriented toward verifiable, repeatable, objective reality. That's what science does. And mathematics gives you the precision, the way of thinking and looking at things precisely, exactly. That is why it's called diamond approach, because it means precise and clear and sharp. That was part of the guidance. And then the guidance then made me lose interest in physics and turn to psychology. And I remember my first, introduction to psychology. It was when I was an undergraduate in Berkeley, and I was visiting a friend, and I found a book on the table. Opened it, was Freud. The first time I see a Freud book. I started reading. I couldn't stop. I kept reading and reading. I was fascinated. That was the beginning. Recognize that psychology is something that turns me on. But what made me pick up that book and orient to psychology, when I was studying physics, hours, most of the day, and then getting teachers who are psychologists, like Claudio Noron was a psychologist, who was a Horne analyst. And another teacher, Gurdjieffian teacher, was into Freud. And then from that, when I was in Colorado, beginning to learn about presence and true nature, all of that, one of my friend, Karen, she was getting married to a graduate student in psychology, and he was becoming a psychiatrist. So I went to their house, picked up this book. Oh, the object relation theory, Margaret Mahler's separation individuation. So, and I started reading, oh, I could recognize that stage. I know what that is in my experience. And I could read, oh, I know that one in my experience. And that became part of the teaching then. But that is guidance. That's what I mean by guidance. See? And so the mind and consciousness was already open, interested, and curious, and has the drive, inherent drive to know reality. I mean, that's why I wanted to study physics and math, is because I wanted to know what is the truth of reality. Because I was, back in high school, whatever, we have religious classes. They teach us the Quran, and God did this. And I said, something doesn't make sense to me. I asked, well, why will God punish people if he's merciful? And I'll have those kind of questions, which the teacher, of course, some of them didn't like. But then I come back to the psychology, how I became interested in it, and the way it got integrated into that. I didn't think of integrating psychology in my experience. I was studying with people who are psychological in some sense, so that they had their impact on me. But I was experiencing presence that was not psychological, was pure beingness, pure isness. But reading these books, which I got interested in for some reason, not because I want to apply them, but I saw in them some of my experience. And so it helped me understand my experience and understand my experience within the context of these different kind of approaches of psychology. Develop the teaching further, give it more structure, more form, gave me a way of working with students, understanding. And then I had students where I could experiment with and work with, and I realized they had the same experience. They worked through the same stages. I didn't intend to. I didn't know it will be. I thought it was me. I found out then it's really universal. And that's how teaching became. I realized there was a teaching. It wasn't just my personal experience. When I realized other people can experience it in the same way. That's how psychology got integrated little by little. And then, of course, I got more interested, started reading more, read all the Freud books, many of the object relation, and then self-psychology, then attachment theory. And the interesting thing is I see, for instance, I have a critique of the psychoanalytic society is they go through different things. There's Freud, and the ego psychology developed, the object relation psychology, then the self-psychology, and then there is, attachment theory. Now they're into trauma. And each iteration of it, they throw away the rest. They say the other one is not good. And they just focus on what they're discovering now. And I talked to them and said, why? They're all good. They all say something that is different and relevant. Just because you're into attachment theory doesn't mean object relation has no use. Does not mean that Freud's way of understanding the thing has no use at all. True, Freud did something, said something that now we could see are not complete or not true, but don't throw away the whole thing. He brought up the whole idea of unconscious repression. I mean, so that is my critique of them. And I actually talked to some of them. They don't care. They're just into what they're into at the present time. And the unique thing about the down approach is that I don't throw away anything I experienced before. It always gets included in whatever a new thing I discover.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's clearly one of the distinctive features is that of the diamond approach, and your stance is one of recognizing the infinite number of facets and perspectives with which life and reality can be understood, and looking for ways to honor them all and bring them together into a coherent, more helpful synthesis. And yeah, beautiful.
And that's why in time developed, I call it the turnings, the many turnings. You know about that? At least 4 turnings, and it's a way of organizing the teaching and the mind, but also a way for students to approach it and to understand context, framework for them to understand their experience or where they are in their experience, what practices to do when they're learning. And each one of the turning has fundamental, deep truths to it. And I don't see them as hierarchical. They're sort of like, although to me they happen one after the other, so it might seem like it's hierarchy. However, I notice with students, It's not hierarchical that way. Can go to the second turning first before they go to the first turning. That's possible.
I was going to, just because I'm here and you're here, this is something that's that I've been interested in, and that I felt some movement towards deeper knowledge or resolution in reading your book. And you have a background in physics. And when I was in Berkeley back in the day, I guess it was in the 80s, I was assistant to Fritjof Capra, who brought physics together with spirituality.
I remember the book, yes.
Really good man. Deep respect for him. But and I study physics, although I don't know the language of mathematics, of advanced mathematics. So I have to listen to describe it. But it seems that in the last 30 or 40 years, physics has just kind of gotten to a cul-de-sac, and it can't get out of its own way. And string theory, that was the best minds were working on that for at least 30 years. And then they kind of went, hey, none of the things it should be predicting actually showed to be true. It looks good mathematically, but not so much any other way. So they've kind of had to put that aside. But I get it, physics, and maybe necessarily so, is so bloody materialistic and reductionistic that I have a feeling if there were, and I don't know how any of your teachings could be expressed mathematically, but your direct knowledge of experience of the ground of being and the emptiness and the nothingness that is the mother of everything that manifests, if that perception or knowledge or wisdom could be brought into the world of physics, we would be doing a lot better. And maybe answering some of these questions like the unified field theory, or what the hell is gravity, or all the things that they're having problems with. And I just thought that because you reveal a universe in which the soul can really know and be taught some of the deepest things that have deeper than the depths of the deep, and that knowledge applied to the world of physics would be very helpful and very revelatory, and might kick us into a renaissance that kind of ended in the first half of the 20th century. It just kind of got stuck.
Yeah, well, it will be nice. But I remember years ago, I was trying to put my experience into mathematical formulas, and I couldn't really. I did something where I couldn't go further because I didn't have the required variables, what is called variables in mathematics. I don't know how to do, like I could do a partial differential equation or whatever, non-Euclidean geometry, all of that. But I didn't know enough math, or I didn't know what would be the value to create such a formula. And maybe that will happen at some point. I don't think it's going to be close soon. As you said, physics is going through its own struggles, and they do have many theories. The interesting thing, however, is that even though there are many questions and answers in physics, and what is true, it keeps developing technology that have good results, accurate results that keep developing new things, new technology. So you wonder, how can science that is sort of not sure of itself develop such things all the time? So that is an interesting thing, a whole topic in itself, for all impression of the past to dissolve one after. It's a long process. It took me decades. And so because of that, the liberation is getting bigger and bigger, freedom expanding. So one can be in a non-dual state and not have worked out their personality, for instance, which can appear more in their life, how the transcendence doesn't appear in their how they relate to other people in life. But So inquiry is an important thing to resolving through this, resolving or dissolving the obstacles, seeing and dissolving obstacle, but also in discovering reality, to be open to the new, possibly, and exploring those new realities, inquiring into it to find out, not just experience, because what is consciousness? What does it do? Where does it come from? At some point, I recognize that consciousness really is not the most fundamental way of knowing reality, true nature. That consciousness is one way it expresses itself. That consciousness is useful, it's a fundamental way, but true nature is actually completely indeterminate. And one can be such indeterminacy, completely indeterminate nature.
And one can experience that. Yes?
Yes, I am that.
Okay.
I am indeterminate. That's why I can't know what I am. At some point, I don't know what I am, but I know I am.
Yeah.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
see, that is more deeper than knowing I am consciousness. More simpler, more fundamental, and freer. But that brings us to the question of the fourth turning. I think important to give the people the orientation, what I mean by fourth turning, because that shows the uniqueness, difference between other teaching. The first turning is the practice and the experience and the realization while we are still in an ordinary life, while we are still an individual and identify ourselves as an individual, right? And there is a spiritual experience. Most people's spiritual experiences happen in that first turning, while they are an individual with the ego and body and all of that. And they have all kind of eruptions, all kind of openings, revelation, experiences. And the first turning has its own realization of being completely free in it while you are in ordinary life. As an individual, that is completely free and timeless. That is the realization of the first turning. So the first turning is the ordinary world, the physical world, a world of people, world of life, and all world of time and space, and how there can be its own spirituality. In India, they call it dualistic paths. I don't think of that dualistic. I call it ordinary, spirituality, which is what most people know, actually. Now, I don't want to negate the spirituality of these people by saying they are not non-dual. You see, the second turning has it more the non-dual, the pontus, where one is the vastness, one is the ocean of consciousness or awareness or silence. And the whole universe manifests out of that. And one is the universe and its nature. And in the second turning, in the Dhyana approach, there are also the subtleties in that kind of second turning. That is a non-dual. And for the Dhyana approach, that is a big part of the teaching. So I don't diss the non-dual. I don't think it's true, one way of experiencing reality. But that does not make it better or more deeper than the first turning, which is the realization of ordinary life. Ordinary life, ordinary world is not an illusion. That's how reality manifests itself. Reality manifests itself as individual with ego. That is how true nature wants it and makes it that way, because it has its value, it has its truth, it has its own spirituality and realization. And then also true nature can manifest itself as the vastness, the nature of everything. That is the second turning. The third turning is completely different from either one of those. It's more what I call the realization of unilocality or non-locality, which is the thing that the teaching that says the whole universe is in a grain of sand.
Yeah.
And I am the grain of sand, which means I am the universe. And that's true about you and about any grain of sand, any point. So that teaching says basically each point of time and space includes all other points of time and space. And it is an interesting way of experiencing the realization of the freedom. The question here is not consciousness, but freedom. That's the value, total freedom. And that opens the door to what's called the fourth turning, which are all kind of other realizations, like the realization of nobody here, nothing here. I'm not consciousness, I'm not awareness, I'm not presence, I'm not ego, I'm not body, I'm not anything. But everything is happening. That is, and there are many kinds of those realizations. The fourth turning has many realizations. I'm just giving you one of them. Or just to tell you the variety that can possible. Zen is more of the third turning. The suchness. Everything is what it is. When they say in Zen, they don't talk about non-duality in cosmic consciousness. They talk about the suchness of thing. You see, a tree is a tree. A flower is a flower, and that's it. And this flower did not come of plant from before it, because time is not a causality. What is now, is that, is it. It is not related to past or future. That's the third turning. And then the fourth turning, of course, as I said, has many realizations, many kinds. There, and each one of them is open to other turning. Like the fourth turning realization is open to third turning, open to non-dual, open to ordinary first turning. And then there is in the last few years, I have what I call the fifth turning, which begins with indeterminacy. That spirit ultimately is indeterminate. The mind cannot say what it is. Cannot say it's awareness, cannot say it's physical, cannot say it's spiritual, cannot say it's nothingness, cannot say it's fullness. All these concepts turn out to be inapplicable. Not wrong, inapplicable in that realm. And that is that begins a whole turning with other realization. But that's the door of the indeterminacy. That's just an overview of the whole path in a very short way. Each turning, when studying it, can take a lifetime or a few years, depending on the person.
And beautiful. Thank you, Hameed. That's an exquisite overview of the turnings, and the first I've heard of the fifth turning. So
I don't talk much about it.
Well, thank you for introducing it. I'm all ears, wanting more, but when you're ready. And these turnings came to you in that sequence, right?
Yeah, they came to me as a sequence from 1, 2. That's why I give them those names 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't know whether there'll be more or not, because one thing about spiritual nature or true nature or nature reality is that it is indeterminate. Because it's indeterminate, it is infinite way that can appears.
Yeah.
No limit to it. So to say, oh, it's pure awareness and that's it. Yes, it is true, but that is one way it can appear. It can appear actually in other ways. And not just as freeing, as liberating, as pure awareness, or love, as pure love. As the Sufis will say, reality is love, God is love, everything is true. And that's a beautiful way of seeing it, and it opens the heart, and you make it generous, and you humble, all of that.
Yeah, there aren't many things I feel confident in proclaiming, but one of them is this game is a lot bigger than I can even imagine. So, And and one of the beauties as you've in your teaching is that it's an openness to always more, and the recognition that any one opening and awakening can be beautiful and valid and empowering and healing, and there's always more.
There's all more. And it depends on the person who want to engage a path. For some people, just going to non-dual, the absolute, or the Zen practice of suchness, or Zen, that could be just fine. That would be the calling for some people, So this path is not necessarily for everybody. There are some which this path people will attract certain people, But one thing I want to do in this as part of my calling is to speak about the validity of all the paths, that each come from true thing, true origin. Just because I talk about other thing, I'm not invalidating any of those. And not only that, those paths know about their thing much more than I know it. Zen knows about their perspective a lot more than I know it. I know something about it. I know it's part of all this teaching. Dzogchen knows about Dharmakaya a lot more than I know about, although I know it from experience and all that. But they spent, centuries developing it, so they know a lot about it. But and so there are many teaching that developed, and some teaching do have richness, like the Vajrayana Buddhism has many things in it, richness, like Enigma has different stages in it. The last one is Dzogchen, for instance. So,
And there's such a beauty in what you're doing, in this honoring of all the traditions and the paths, and the recognition that each one is an expression of the absolute, bringing forward another understanding, another facet of this indeterminate, infinite reality. And there's also a beauty in your presenting so many possibilities in the diamond work that, as you said, it's important for people to find their own path and what works for them. And there's the possibility to, within the multiple dimensions of the diamond approach, to for people to find what works for them. And I assume your teachers, one of their roles is to guide people to practices that work for them.
Yeah. And even in our teachings, some students seem to, their experience fall on more on one turning or another, that seems to work for them. Although we teach all of them. And at some point, we should spend more time on the inquiry that you brought up, because that is, it's quite a practice. It's a skill of consciousness that uses the laws of consciousness and awareness and true nature, and employs many manifestations of true nature, of spiritual nature, and its guidance, because it's the usage of guidance, you see. And we should spend some time in it, not today. We don't have time for it, but I think it might require more detail. But there are many things in this path that we can explore. That's why I agree to do more than, to do a bunch of time together.
Well, thank God for that. And Hameed, while I was been engaged in your teachings in this book, I did an inquiry just so I could, be more than just the idea of it. And I found it very powerful and very helpful. I went down and saw things that I didn't know about what was my problem, my suffering, my grief. I went boom, 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 and it just seemed to open up spaciousness where there had just been closeness. And it was very powerful and very effective, and I'm still benefiting from that. And I'm wanting to put that more into my practice. And so I'd love, and other times I'd love you to explore more about that, and kind of things that you use to begin, the questions that you begin to use
Yeah.
Where to begin.
Good. I'm glad you found it useful, and you're learning how to practice it. And the book, I wrote a book about this, a Space Cruiser Inquiry. That's about the inquiry, that book. It goes in more detail about what inquiry is and what's involved in it.
It's also on YouTube where you talk about that. There's a really good part of that. So it's also available.
Yeah.
But get the book.
Yeah.
But that's
Hameed, we
go deep into it. That's the book too. If they want to study, read a book about it. That's the book. But yeah.
Hameed, we're coming probably towards the end of our time for today. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we close?
One thing is that recognize that for an individual to engage spiritual work, it is natural for the beginning to experiment and learn about different things and go to different teachers. But I think at some point one need to focus on one path, one teaching, one teacher, and go deep into it for there to be true maturation, true fruition, and realization. I think many these days, many podcasts, many YouTube, many things. And so people, like a supermarket, some people can get lost going from one thing to another. So they could stay on the surface. It was all interesting, learning different things. But for the true realization to really get into the spiritual universe and find the richness and the beauty and the freedom in it, you need to go deep. You need to go vertical, not horizontal. And that requires a path and a commitment. That some people do, and some people recognize at some point that they need to do. And the other thing is that about the motivation, what I call the enlightenment drive, can appear differently for different people. For some, they want freedom from suffering. Some wants to know reality. Some wants to be one with God. Some wants ultimate peace or contentment. Some want happiness. It appears in different ways. But as long as the important thing is to feel that drive, that fire, that passion, that we need that to sustain us to continue on a path regardless of difficulty, because there are always going to be difficulties and obstacles. I spent years dealing with difficulties. But to know that it's possible by engaging the path and to really do it and to fruition to happen, it's possible to be free. All those obstacles will evaporate and there'll be just simple freedom and enjoyment of life without anybody enjoying it.
Love that.
Well, this no one has been wonderfully enjoying our dialogue and just so grateful to you, Hameed, and what a gift for giving so many people. So thank you so much, and to be continued.
Yes, deeply, deeply thank you, Hameed.
And a nice conversation. We'll continue it. Yeah.
Thank you, Hameed.
Okay.
Greetings, everyone. This is John Dupuy, and I'm here speaking on the behalf of the Deep Transformation Podcast and our team and my co-host, Dr. Roger Walsh. If you're listening to this, you've probably been moved and inspired by the content, and it's certainly been a miraculous alchemical journey for Roger and myself and those who have been following us. So what I'd like to ask you to do, if you feel so guided, Spirit says, think, do this, or an angel with a flaming sword comes up, says, do this. Anyway, any of those things, if you'd like to help and donate on this page, it could be a one-time gift or it could be an ongoing monthly, however you feel best guided. But let me tell you what it'll be used for. We've done this podcast thus far out of pocket. Okay. Roger and I have paid for it. We feel it's been very, very successful, and it's important what's going on here. And we would use your donation to improve the quality. I don't know if we can improve the quality of the conversation, because basically in God's hands, and it's been going very well. It's been really extraordinary if you watch the podcast. But we would use it for that, and chiefly to market this and get it out to a larger audience, because we think it's worthwhile, and we think it has a part, ever so small, in this vastly changing, very interesting time in human history and the history of our planet. So if you can help, if you feel so guided, we would really deeply appreciate it. God bless and thank you.